two types of reproduction. There's asexual reproduction, which means asexual, no sex. In other words, there's no combination of eggs and sperm. It's like cloning. So asexual reproduction happens oftentimes in bacteria. There's actually even some animals that can do this, such as Komodo dragon, which is kind of unusual. They're keeping female Komodo dragon in the London Zoo, and all by herself. She was in her enclosure by herself with no males around. And then one morning, the London zookeepers came in to visit her, and they found out she had babies. There was no males. A male Komodo dragon didn't sneak in overnight. So she laid eggs. And that is called Parthenogenesis. So Parthenogenesis is producing offspring without having sexual reproduction. So it's a form of asexual reproduction. The problem with that is they're all the same. The offspring are like clones of the mother. They're all the same. So think about it. If we're all the same, the population is all the same. In other words, made of individuals that have the same genes. That means they all have the same immunity to certain diseases. So if a disease wipes out one individual, if everybody's the same, it's going to wipe out the entire population. So scientifically, our diversity is important. Genetic diversity is what keeps us alive, because everybody has different immune systems. And if a disease comes along and affects one individual, it doesn't affect every individual the same, because we're different. So if everybody were identical and we were susceptible to a disease, in other words, we could die from it or at risk for getting the disease, it could eliminate the entire population. So nature is engineering genius. Nature is an engineering genius. So how does nature solve this problem? By creating genetic diversity, which is due to sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is reproduction in which genes are mixed up. They're shuffled. And sexual reproduction involves an egg cell and a sperm cell. So a mother's cell is an egg cell called an oocyte, and the male's, the father's sex cell is a sperm. So fertilization is when the egg and sperm come together. Right? The sperm actually fertilizes the egg. So the DNA in the sperm is inserted into the egg cell. And the genes are different. The sperm cell has different genes than the egg cell. So when they combine to form a zygote, which is a fertilized egg, it creates something different. So that zygote is different than the mother, it's different than the father. It's like shuffling cards. So sexual reproduction is really like shuffling a deck of cards. If you have the deck of cards separated into two smaller decks, that one small deck is the mother, one small deck is the father. They have different cards in them. They have different genes. And when we shuffle them, we're mixing those genes up, creating a zygote. The zygote, remember, is a fertilized egg. This is what we all start off as. Our life, all of our lives, have started off as a single fertilized egg called a zygote. And that zygote is a mixture of genes from your mother and from your father. This is not cloning. That genetic variation is important because it protects us. And a lot of scientists believe that sexual reproduction evolved to fight off disease, to protect the population from being eliminated by a disease. Because we all have, the fact that we breed through sexual reproduction, we all have different genes in us. So we have different immune systems because we have different genes. Remember, the genes are the instructions. They make the immune system the way it is. Although there are some environmental things that can affect your immune system, like stress, chemotherapy. People have to take, if they have cancers, drugs. There's certain things that affect your immunity, but it is also due to your genetics. So part of your immune system is just based on genetics. Some people have weaker immune systems than others, just based on their genes. So the fact that we all have different immune systems, that means if a disease comes into the population, not everybody's going to die because some of us are immune. So scientists honestly believe the reason for sexual reproduction is to protect the population from disease. And remember, nature is the best engineer there is. It's designed for survival. It's designed for survival and passing on genes to offspring to continue survival in the species. So that is one mechanism that increases the chances of surviving. So sexual reproduction is a mechanism of survival. If we all cloned each other, if we were just clones of each other, and one of us was susceptible or vulnerable to a disease, then all of us would be vulnerable. And pretty soon, the whole population is gone. All right, so sexual reproduction is important, and there's advantages to sexual reproduction. Even animals that do reproduce sexually, if their populations are very small, and a lot of endangered species are facing this problem because the population size is very small. In other words, their genetic diversity is limited. So cheetahs are a perfect example. Now their population size is very, very small, so they're really all kind of related, closely related to each other. They're like brothers and sisters of each other. They don't have that much genetic variation. So populations that have low genetic variation are at risk to dying out, because if one gets a disease, it'll spread through the population faster because they have so much genetic similarity. They're so similar. Their immune systems are similar. So this is a risk this is a big risk of endangered species or animals or species in which the population numbers are very small. And I used to work, I volunteered at the National Zoo's Conservation and Research Center with the Smithsonian Institute for a summer, and they had endangered species they were studying, and one of them was the Blackfooted Ferret, and at that time there were like 30 individuals total in the population, the whole population, the species, there were like 30, and they had some of them at this place, and just to go in and study them, the scientists would have to dress up like in hazmat suits. They'd have to pretty much sterilize themselves before they went in to even see the animals, because they didn't want to expose any of those animals to any new diseases. Because if one of them got the disease, it would just spread through the rest of them, and the population would be gone. So they had to really kind of sterilize themselves when they were going in to see the animals. They had to dress like a hazmat suit, step in bleach, make sure they weren't going to transfer any new diseases to these animals, because there were so few of them left. They were at risk for going extinct. So this is a massive problem with endangered species today. And even if the numbers were to increase, for example, like the cheetah population, if the population increases, they're still started off with a small number. So the variation is still limited. Originally, the population was massive. So if you think of a bottle, let's say I have a bottle, an empty bottle, it's full of marbles. And the marbles are all different colors. And that's the way the population was a long time ago, the cheetahs. So let's say each marble is a different type of gene. And if you think of the whole population of cheetahs as just a population of genes, we call that a gene pool. So it's like a pool of genes. It's a population of genes. So if we were to look at the population of cheetahs a long time ago, it would be like a full bottle, say a 2-liter bottle, full of marbles. And each those marbles are all different colors. Lots of different genes. But due to human overpopulation, habitat loss, poaching, it's decreased the population very fast. So it's like turning the bottle over. And then only a few, and then collecting some of those marbles in a cup. Only some marbles are going to pass through. So let's say we only collect a sample from that bottle. So the end gene pool is much, much smaller than the beginning. And it went through that bottleneck. And that's why they call it a bottleneck effect. And this is when the gene pool is reduced in size very fast. So the genetic variation is decreased very fast. It limits the genetic variability of the population. So it increases their chances of becoming extinct. So the bottleneck effect is what happened with the cheetahs. And so right now we're really looking into the cup with only a few different marbles in the cup. And that's the gene variation that is present in the cheetah population today. So you can see why genetic variation is so important, but it all goes back to sexual reproduction.